And I noticed that I remember the nasty things much more easily than the pleasant things. That's the quality of the stickiness of negative thoughts. I think, okay, that's it, don't need that anymore. I'm free now of the stickiness of internet negative thoughts coming through the internet. So that is something that, to realization, there is a voice, and there's a lot of it is negative. Complaining is a very common thing and this is all the egoic thinking. Any thinking that you're identified with, that you are trapped in, is part of your ego. It is the ego thinking in you, the conceptual identity in the head. And so complaining is a very favorite one for many people. And now, of course, in the past, before the internet arrived, they could complain in their head, or they could complain to somebody they met in the coffee shop, or their family members or friends. But now, you can complain, and thousands of people can read it, and who resonate at the frequency of complaining, millions, and they complain with you, and it goes up. And so the internet, now you can see it out there, it's in the mind. You can see the externalization of the human mind by reading what goes on out there. So they are called the perpetually aggrieved. The perpetually aggrieved, you find them everywhere on the internet, and they are angry. And even if you say, love is all there is, or you can say, love, you get very angry responses. How dare you say that? And that is the human mind. So you can learn about the human mind, but the best way to learn about the human mind is through self-observation, your own mind. And then you realize these are thoughts. So you talk to yourself. Okay, and then how do you know that? Because already there's some awareness behind the thoughts. There it is. And there you know, these are thoughts that I've been thinking for years, and they're still there. But at least you have disidentified. You have stepped out. So there is, when you're not awakened, your awareness and your thinking are a single thing. They are together. The awakening means your consciousness. So in the non-awakened state, your consciousness is absorbed by thinking. It's trapped. And as you awaken, and sometimes because the thinking just gets too painful, as this man in prison in solitary confinement I just mentioned, can you imagine what was going through his mind for years, how the torture of his mind? And at some point, there's a separation, and there's the awareness, and there's the thinking. And suddenly you realize there's two of me, so to speak. There's the thinking entity, the personality, with the historical personality, with all its flaws and likes and dislikes and desires and fears, whatever makes up that personality, all the anxiety, all the stuff that keeps you awake at night, and there's a beingness or a presence, a stillness, but an alive presence behind it. And so you're not identified. There's still some thinking that goes on. It might not immediately subside, but you're no longer, your identity is no longer in the stream of thinking. Your sense of self, your identity, and that is the vital thing, your sense of self or identity has removed itself from the stream of thinking. It still has consciousness, it uses some of the consciousness, but consciousness has freed itself from the stream of thinking. And here you are as a still presence, sensing that stillness in yourself, that alertness, that alert stillness, and there's some thought still happening there. So that is the awakening to who you are, so that your identity then is no longer determined by what your mind is telling you who you are. For many people, it's not pleasant. And if your mind is telling you what your mind is telling you is totally pleasant for you, there are two possibilities. Either you're completely deluded, deluding yourself, or you actually have arrived at a point in your life where things are going extremely well, and all I can say is just wait. So, but the fundamental thing is the separation of so that the awareness, the consciousness is who you essentially are, is no longer trapped in the stream of thinking. And from there you can observe the thinking, but you can also just be, and you will then find more moments happen when there is no thinking. And you are fully there without remembering your successes or your failures or your opinions, without remembering any of that, but you know yourself as at this very moment. I'm not just talking. You can know yourself at this very moment as a presence, an alive presence, the I am. And for a moment, thought subsides completely. That is the secret of our evening together, to find in yourself, and many of you already have access to it, if not all the time, of course, but to find in yourself the ability to step out of thinking and be there just as a presence. And that you can start with simple things, and that is observing how that state arises spontaneously already in your daily life from time to time. Now, this is why I'm saying, why I've said earlier, you overlook the most essential dimension in you all the time, because the mind is so noisy. The mind and the sense perceptions that feed the mind continuously, completely overwhelm you with noise, so to speak, metaphorically speaking, and actual noise too. So then you never looked at the spaciousness underneath it all, the spaciousness. And so observe spontaneously when you open the curtains in the morning, you get up, if you have curtains, or you might have blinds. Curtains seem to be old-fashioned, but I'm old-fashioned. So the blinds, you look out of the window. Now, if you're very alert, you will notice for the first 2 or 3 seconds of looking out of the window, you are not thinking. You are simply perceiving. But most people don't know that. After the 3 seconds, immediately comes the interpretation of your sense perception, which is, well, if you're in Vancouver, it's more likely to be, oh, it's raining again. Or if you're in a climate, as a teenager, I lived in Spain from the age of 15 to 19 and a half. In the summers, they are very long and very hot. And there I remember opening the window the shutters in the morning. Oh no, not another sunny day, I can't stand it. So, but notice there's a moment when you're perceiving a space in which the perception happens. And there are many times during the day when you first look at something or you first listen to something, in the first moment, before the interpretation comes, there's just the perception in the aware presence. And if you notice that happens sometimes spontaneously, in nature perhaps more likely than in a city, because in a city everything is human-made, so it tends to stimulate thought. In nature, this tends to stimulate thought much less. So if you go out into nature, it is easier to perceive without imposing immediately conceptualization on the sense perception. So that, and this is the most, I would say, one of the most fundamental, we could call it spiritual practices, but it's a practice of transcendence of the egoic mind, transcendence of the conditioned mind, of the entire conditioning, transcendence of the personality, in the simple thing of walking around nature, let's say nature for a moment, and looking at things in that state of alert stillness, looking either at a single thing like a fern or a tree or a leaf, or looking at the totality of a particular landscape or an area in the forest, and you're looking and you discover, and many of you are able to do that and perhaps doing it already, and some of you perhaps don't even know that you're doing it. You just know that you become very peaceful in nature and you feel more alive. Why? Because you are thinking less. Because little spaces in the otherwise continuous stream of thinking are arising spontaneously. And in that, you are in touch with your essence more deeply. The nature can help you, put you in touch with that essence identity. You are the consciousness, very much like, let's use an analogy, you have a painting, and beautiful painting, and normally the painting is aware of it's a strange analogy. The painting is aware of itself as the particular thing that it shows, that's painted on the canvas, and suddenly the painting is aware that the most essential thing about it is the canvas on which the landscape is painted. And you become aware of that background canvas that enables everything else to be. That is the awareness. And you are that. Personality is secondary. Whether or not your life at this moment could be considered going very well, there may be one or two of you here, or whether your life situation is problematic, that is normal. Yes, even if people in the street, they've got it all together. No, they don't. Their life situation is just as problematic as yours. It's in the nature of things that problems arise continuously, and that's okay. And rather than thinking, I need to eliminate all the stuff that makes my life problematic, okay, you can eliminate many things, and then other things crop up somewhere else. And so there's always something in your life situation that may not be so great, even if you practice positive thinking, which is not quite a nice thing, it's not the ultimate, but it's nice. If you don't know who you are, then positive thinking becomes problematic also. So get in touch with the underlying, the canvas, be the canvas, realize you are the canvas. Okay, I'll give you another analogy, they're all a little limited. Let's say there's a movie on the screen, there's actors acting out their lines. And that movie is, let's say you are one of the figures on the movie screen going through the motions. Of course, you have to say what's in the script, so you can't help it. But in this analogy, the script is, of course, in your mind. You're acting out your mind. And suddenly you become aware of something that in addition to this entity, you are also something else. And what are you? There's a light from the projector that is being projected onto the screen. And you suddenly realize that your essential nature is actually the light that's being projected. And so the actor on the screen or the actress suddenly realizes, oh, this is actually not so bad because this is just going through the motions of my conditioning and the personality, speaking the lines, the script in my mind, and a sense of freedom comes in. Now let's remove the analogy. So freedom comes in when you step out of the conditioned mind and realize yourself as awareness. And that is the realization that you do not need to think all the time. That voice in the head can subside, and then you can go in your daily life, you can have moments when instead of being a thinking entity, which is a person, you are a presence. And you look at things more and more in spacious awareness. You get these spaces, and then you let's say you meet another human being. And for the first time, perhaps you're not imposing immediately judgments on the other human. And you just look at them, and you listen to what they have to say, and you look. But there's more than the external sense perception. You can also sense the aliveness, the consciousness of the other, because your mind is still. You can sense your own consciousness. It's not your own, we just call it your own. And you can sense the other person's consciousness, and you realize it's the same consciousness, expressing itself through different bodies and different minds. And that is called an outflow of goodwill or benevolence towards the other, because you have realized that which makes you essentially one. And we could call that love, not in a conventional sense, but love in the sense of, my definition of love is recognizing the other as yourself. So really, that all you ever love is yourself in the other, because there's only one consciousness. And so when that separation goes, then the way in which you relate to other humans changes very much. So because you don't hold their personality against them anymore, which is easy to do. We've all been conditioned to do that. Then you can fully recognize their personality and what it does, but you can also sense there is a being underneath the personality that is awareness, that is consciousness. And then you feel benevolence or goodwill or compassion towards the other. You can feel compassion even with dysfunctional behavior of humans. Because you realize they don't know any better. They are trapped in their conditioned personality. And that is a beautiful shift. And then relationships change and it's a wonderful thing to feel this outflow of benevolence or goodwill towards another, even people you just meet briefly. There's always then an additional factor to the meeting of the other person. You might go into a shop to buy something, you might stop somebody to ask for directions, and usually on the personality level, that's the only reason for the interaction. But if you are in touch with your essential beingness, and there's a moment of stillness while you are looking or listening to the other person, then there's an added dimension to this interaction with that person, even though it may only be half a minute. And that transforms the way in which you lead your life. And that is